Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. This is one of my favorite episodes of the year. What we typically do is wrap up the year and review some of the biggest takeaways from all the episodes that we've had across the entire year of 2024. So this is a special episode where I don't have a special guest, but I have 24 nuggets of complete strategies and insights to share with you guys. So in this episode here, I do pull out 24 of the most impactful and powerful strategies or tips that we've learned across the year from our past guest. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode here. That wraps up the year of 2024. Looking forward to seeing you guys all in 2025. But get your pen and paper out because I'm sure you're going to learn a thing or two in this year-end episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. Cheers. You know, a lot of people are wondering, is it worth doing mailing? What are your thoughts on that end? Obviously it is because you're doing it, but any insights in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I've seen both sides of the spectrum and both sides recently. I wasn't texting in 2021 when it was booming, right? So I've seen it on the slower end. And then I've seen mailing where we're at right now. And, the cost of a mailing campaign, for example, might run me anywhere between, on the low end, 300, on the high end, 700, because I'm trying to mail about 1,000 to 1,200, maybe 1,500 a week, roughly. So it's costing me, $500-600 a week to mail. But my goal, and this comes from my mentor, my goal is to get at least one deal per mailing campaign. And the fun thing with mailing campaign, at least how I operate, is I do a lot of blind offers. My primary business is fully in blind offers. I'm making an assessed offer based off of the county's value. I'm in Florida, so it's pretty good data. So, if it costs me $500 or $600 and I make 9 or 10 grand on one deal, I would take that day and night.
I will say one thing, and this is maybe just to give a little encouragement to your listeners that may be in the same spot and have busy lives and a full-time job and are trying to do this as a side hustle, because let's face it, that's where I think most people start is as a side hustle, is just you got to get in community. Like I said, I definitely I probably would have given up, right? If I wouldn't have had those guys every Monday or Tuesday. I think we've changed it a couple of times, but we were on a call every week. And I just kept showing up. And if you ask Buck, actually Buck told me this a couple of months ago. He said, one thing I really appreciate about you is you just always show up. Just always show up. And I sometimes felt like I didn't have a lot to contribute because I didn't make 5 sales that week like some of the guys were doing. But I was like, it's better for me to be here than to be off somewhere else and wallowing in it. So getting community, started going to a couple of land events last year, and that made a big difference to me as well. Just to kind of meet people like yourself face to face, and it just makes a huge difference. Hard to really put a value on what that is. So if any way, shape, or form you can get around more land investors.
I mean, the question I had written down here was like, on average, how long is that call? You mentioned you like to keep that first initial call between 3 to 5 minutes, get what you need, and then get back to them after with that offer. But let's say the follow-up calls after that. I mean, do the times typically vary? I mean, when you're sort of managing somebody who wants to do cold calling, what do you sort of put down a limit as to how long people can talk, or do you encourage lengthier talks? And what does it look like on average?
On average, it's a little bit longer, but it also depends on how much we've been able to do in due diligence. And it depends a lot on the seller themselves. So right. A lot about this business is being able to adjust to the type of person you're talking to on the fly, so very good social skills are extremely valuable when right. all your negotiations are taking place and discussions are taking place over the phone. So I would say it tends a little bit longer, but it can also be shorter. It could be like, hey, we've got 2 or 3 quick due diligence questions asked. This person is not really a chatty person. So what I would say is like, there's a big difference between that kind of call on a cold call and that kind of call with a lead. Okay. I am perfectly happy to hear your life story about the land and anything else you want to talk about. If I think that there's a nice deal waiting for me at the end, as I've built some rapport, and even if it's going to take me 5 calls, but in a lot of ways it can be more lucrative because people will do deals with people they like, and then it's like no. So that played a big factor in me wanting to outsource, to be frank, because if somebody else is doing that and I just get to see a warm lead on the other side, and now this lead is potentially turning into a contract, I'm much more inclined to give my more valuable time to that conversation. But yeah, I mean, it's the name of the game in this, in specifically in this like lead gen method. Like, you need to be ready to talk to people. If you're doing your own cold calling, yeah, you need to be a conversationalist. That's for sure.
Why do you like sending mailing? Is it just because it works and you're going to stick with it? What's sort of the mindset with that?
Yeah. So for me and for us as a company, ultimately, I had to sit back and decide what kind of organization do I want, right? What kind of team do I want? How do I want the company to run? And as I did that a few years back, it became clear to me that I wanted a super small team. I wanted highly qualified leads, right? And the best method that I know of to do that in land is direct mail, right? It is very much an inbound marketing channel as opposed to outbound, like texting or cold calling, these other methods where you're driving out. I just want to generate the marketing and have them call us. And so the type of lead that we get, how the level of qualification is so much higher with direct mail as opposed to the other methods. And we have dabbled in other things, tried more neutral approaches, or tried texting, or tried online like kind of PPC ads, and none of them really got us the kind of lead we were looking for. And we always struggled with them. And I didn't realize why that was until about 6 months ago, when it became clear that like, oh man, what I'm looking for is inbound leads, not outbound leads. And like, that wasn't until I had kind of learned more about how that works that like that clicked in my mind. Like, that's why I've always loved mail. That's why I keep doing mail. And at this point, like, we're going to keep scaling into mail, for our goals well into the 8 figures.
With this one first virtual assistant, because I was like, why aren't they fitting in? Like I was spoiled basically from this first one. And so I figured out a strategy where I spoke to my virtual assistant that was my right hand, and I said, listen, if you know anyone personally who would be a good fit on our team, bring that person in, and I'd love to interview them. And so he started bringing in people that he knew personally and that he had already kind of pre-screened. And I don't know, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't think about this sooner, but I mean, he was with me for 3 years. He knew exactly what I liked, how I like to work. He knew what the culture was and what the expectations were. So he was able to go through kind of like a Rolodex in his mind and say, okay, I know this guy really well, more than I would ever know him just from an interview, and he would be a good fit or he wouldn't be a good fit. And that does a number of things in terms of accountability. But one of the really cool things that I found is that whoever brings someone in, they feel kind of responsible for that person.
How did you find that out? What did you do to figure it out? And what are you continuing to do to sort of figure the messaging out?
Yeah. So really, it was just iteration over time, learning that, because my first mailers all said quick cash close. So yeah. I did the same thing. And it's just, I did acquisitions initially. I think I did 40-ish deals before hiring anyone. And I quickly started to realize like this is not what these people care about. I mean, again, occasionally you get distress. We have a lead we might close today, distress, but it's not the majority. So just iteration is how I figured that out. And then just continually talking now with my acquisition people, what are you hearing, and looking at on all the deals we are closing versus the ones that end up just listing on market and not being worth our time, dissecting what were the buzzwords they were saying, the kind of things they were mentioning were important or weren't mentioning, versus those ones that we closed. And so consistently when we hear, oh, you just want to get rid of it, or inherited it, or we were going to move, but we didn't, or we're getting old, just don't want to deal with it.
I'd never heard anybody actually track that before. And what we found is when we had longer talk times, we had a better ability for people to do two things. Okay. Number one is we're a 2-call close shop. And what that means is we do one phone call strictly to get information from a seller. And at the end of that, the desired outcome for us is two things. Number one, to book an appointment with our closer. And number two, to get an asking price out of the seller. So what we saw is longer talk times equaled both of those things being more probable in our outcomes. I don't have exact numbers for you, but I know that when a lead manager call was over 10 minutes long, almost every time we got some form of an asking price. And my lead manager spearheaded this, found out herself, actually built her own objection handling out of it, which was phenomenal. But that's the biggest objection or like no you're going to get out of somebody is them, hey, you called me, you reached out to me, you tell me what you would pay for it, right?
I made a goal this year to add, from our existing note portfolio to add another 100 notes this year. And we would like it to be about $299 minimum note per month. So adding 100 notes this year would, add about 30 grand a month in recurring revenue or MRR, monthly recurring revenue. And so that's our goal for this year. And I made a bunch of different goals, but right now, the only thing on my mind as far as like the land business is buying 100 parcels that can be sold for 300 plus per month, and just, selling it.
How long are the terms typically for? About $300 a month?
Yeah, it's about like a car payment. I've noticed that usually works the best. So it's anywhere between 3 years to 7 years. Most of them being about right in the middle at 5 years.
So Pete, why do you like sort of the whole wholesaling model and seller financing as well?
So wholesaling is honestly like we do it. It's not the most profitable thing to do because, you always get negotiated on margin from other investors on the buy side and the sell side. And you kind of get squeezed. But when you do enough volume and you move it quickly, it helps you kind of tighten your cash flow cycles. So if you want to get liquidated very quickly, waiting for a property to sell for 6 months, is great, but you also want to keep that cash flow coming in. So we do wholesale only so that we can buy more retail deals.
So, I don't know how many actual teens listen to this podcast, but for others that want to get into the business too, then it would really mean there needs to be some sort of parental involvement in the business as well.
I'm not so sure about this, but there are states in which you can found an LLC when you're 60, but I don't think you can be the only member of the LLC. So you would need to have an 18-year-old do that with you, but they don't have to be the founding member. So there are ways to get around it a little bit. But when it comes to putting your name on the piece of paper, you need an 18-year-old.
Yeah. Awesome. That's awesome. In terms of that calling process, I mean, you were brand new to it, like you say. Some of your calls are more like changing your doctor's appointment. But did you learn anything out of it? How would you sort of improve that first call you might have made, or did you feel like it just went flawlessly?
I'm not sure if it went flawlessly. I would definitely say it. The more I've done calls with sellers, the more like natural it felt. Like I just know what I need to say next to get the conversation moving, to figure out, to get the information I need out of them. But the first time I made that call, I was pretty clear with what information I needed to get. And so I think that really helped me ask the questions that needed to be asked. But I was definitely pretty awkward, called, hi, is this Larry? It's not easy to just jump right into it and just immediately be throwing out all the terms and know everything to say. And like when they say something that I wasn't expecting, how do I respond to that? But I think that's something that comes with time and experience. You just have to put the hours in.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned equity funding. Can you just repeat what that means again? For some people listening to this, it might be a first time they've heard of that. What does that exactly mean again?
Yeah, so usually the differentiation is just going to be equity versus debt. So with equity positions, for funders like us, we're just coming in with capital that we're managing internally, and some folks, they might be having other internal capital partners on the back end that they're raising from. They might even be taking out debt on their own. There's a lot of ways to structure it. In our company, Serious Land Capital, we just have management equity, meaning myself and my two partners. We just have a pool of liquidity that we can pull from at any given time. So it's quick to make decisions, and we don't have to worry about raising capital accordingly there.
So I got on the assessor's website in the county next to me and basically did the same thing. Just clicked on vacant parcels and manually wrote down the names and addresses, and then I kind of manually skip traced them too. And I did that for about 2 months before I found another property to buy. And I think I bought that one for 15 and sold it for like 38 or something like that. And I just realized at that point, that's a lot of electrical work you have to do to make 18 grand. So I kept doing it super manually like that for the next 2 deals that I did. And then after like the third deal, I told my wife, I was just like, look, I'm going to start phasing out electrical work. I'm going to start doing this, more full time. And at first I didn't realize that land investing was like actually a thing. And then after I bought my first piece and sold it, I started diving further into like the actual business of it. And that's when I realized that's, it's a whole thing.
So by the time you did the third deal, or you were working on that third deal, you already knew, hey, this is actually something you can do on an ongoing basis.
So I'm still very much involved in the operations of the business, and I touch every deal that we are going under contract on. I'm still the signer on everything, but
right.
Yeah, my goal for this quarter and Q2 of 2024 is to continue to delegate or abdicate where necessary all tasks that I don't need to be involved in.
Yep.
That aren't high 6, multiple 7-figure tasks.
Hey, how's it going? I hope you're enjoying this episode here with Mason. Mason clearly loves processes, SOPs, delegating. He comes from that world, and he knows the importance of that, about investing in others, because it'll just give you a bigger ROI. Now let's just say you've picked your county, you've looked for a market. What's sort of the next step here then, or what have you been trying after that? Is there anything else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, for sure. This is some tactical stuff. So I hope people at home are taking notes or writing this down, because I promise you this works. In fact, this strategy is what we created inside of Leah, and then recently we've just kind of been figuring out, okay, how can we make it a little bit easier to execute on it? So it's one thing to find a high demand market. If you're watching this at home and you're in this process, you know what I'm talking about. You find a smoking hot market. You go to pull the pricing and try to understand the values in the market. Can't make sense of any of it. You're like, what the hell am I looking at here? It's all over the place. So the model that we teach inside of Leah is you need to find pockets of homogeneous pricing. There's a slew of ways to do that. There's actually way more ways than what I'll list here, but the main ways are going to be through zip codes. Zip codes typically have reliable pricing. Next is going to be through polygons, so breaking markets down by geography. As in, I have a valley and then I have mountains. Those should be separated because they're going to have different prices. The next are subdivisions. We find subdivisions typically have kind of continuous pricing. And then the last one is going to be acreage ranges. So actually grouping markets by very tight acreage ranges. So what I'm going to do is pull that data, and I'm just going to go grab it from Redfin, let's say. I'm going to start kind of perusing through those sold comps and trying to see once I remove the outliers. So the outliers would be the properties that are swamps or on the side of cliffs. So what we've seen from following this process before and after, it's a 91.67% increase in ROAS. So most people inside of Leah are doing whatever, 8, 10x ROAS. We're doubling that through this process. And then a 79% increase in offer accuracy. I mean, really, I think where this business is going is like the day and age of just being spray and pray on everything is disappearing. I think it's really about being a sniper. And we see it, dude. There's tons of people. There's a guy inside of Leah who just joined I think 4 months ago, dude, he's done over 1,000 acres worth of deals, the 35 plus deals that he's done in 4 months. And so it doesn't mean that your volume has to be low. It's just having a really efficient business.
So the first one I use, I call it our $100 list. And many times when we build a list, we want people that have owned for a long period of time. But for the $100 list, I want people that have owned for 5 years or less. And many times when a family member may quit claim a property to another family member, there's not an actual sales price, but in the county records, there's a placeholder. And so many times it's $10 or $100, kind of a nominal amount. So I go into my county and I'll do a search for the last 5 years, and then I'll pull up and I'll put sales price $100 to $100. And again, my time parameter is 5 years, but then I can click on document type and property type. Well, the document type I put on is probate, quit claim, or death certificate. And that means, some person on title may have passed away. The mother that lives in Florida may have quit claimed the property to the son in California, and what he really has is a tax bill, or it may have gone through probate. And so in those circumstances, many times it's someone that acquired the property, but what they really acquired is a tax bill. I call that our $100 list.
And so the problem that we are solving is we need to get opportunities to come through our business like a conveyor belt, and we need to convert those opportunities. And our ability to scale, our ability to have profit is all based on our return on ad spend, right? And so you can have a couple of core metrics that you focus on. How much does it cost for me to get a lead? What's my return on my average ad spend? What's my average profit per deal? And you focus on a couple of things like that and hold yourself accountable to those. And that's saying, hey, that's the type of operations that I'm actually running. Because we're a sales and marketing business. We're not like recruiting people for headhunters, right? And so they're different. Depending on the business dictates the type of things that you should track and hold your own self accountable for in order to be successful, and classify yourself as I'm a successful operator. There is this narrative that is prevailing, and I keep using that word, but it's so true, about scale out of your business. Dude, if you're not making $2 million a year, how can you scale out of your business? If you're not making $3 million a year, why are you scaling out of your business? Why are you taking you, who has the most amount of skin in the game, to close deals, to price markets, to find markets, to have conversations with investors? Why are you trying to scale out of that? It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to scale out of, right? And so an operator, for me, is someone that is understanding how everything in their business connects. And they hold the people, the positions, and the departments accountable to results. And that is the operator part of the business. And they also understand sometimes I need to set in to make sales calls. I understand, and I could be wrong, Jesse, you still take sales calls for Pebble.
Yep.
Right. Who's going to close someone better than you about taking sales calls? You're going to hire someone and give up 10% or 12% of the revenue, or you might love it. You might say, I love it. And people want to just scale out of that, the most important things that they can do in their land business.
You got to keep marketing to get leads in, and it's all about numbers and it's all about volume. Obviously, the more calls that we make, the more mail that we send, the more leads that come in. Loads of people were talking about deals they're doing. So there are still deals out there, but now you've got to double down. And I often say this when markets go through cycles, because that's what we're in. We're in a cycle. When everyone else zigs, you got to zag. So do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Double down on cold calling, change your direct mail piece. Go with something a little bit different to capture more attention. And that stuff does make a difference. But the reason why we also brought cold calling in-house is we can see the lead flow a lot quicker. So once we get someone set up, they're getting leads in 24 hours. So that instantaneous response rate is much faster than what it is in direct mail. And so that's why we're now doing the bulk of that. The other thing we're doing is strategizing with people, like that funnel I said before. So once you've gone through cold calling, then we switch to direct mail. But we do two things there. Number one, we want to assess the areas. So out of everything that we cold called, what are some of the areas working well? Where did you get some really good leads that you're looking at properties and going, oh yeah, I want to do more in that area or that area? Because then let's do the direct mail and double down into those areas.
So I didn't know this in college, right? I didn't know that. But at my core, it's always been there. I've always loved those 3 traits. And I just knew that we connected on all 3 of those traits. And that's allowed us to develop everything else around it. But you build that foundation around the values. But the way to meet those people is just to meet as many people as possible. So visionaries, this is going to be much easier for you because you're likely loving going to events and it's easy for you to get out there and meet tons of people. Integrators, maybe not so much. Integrators may like to be more behind the scenes, but it's just as important for people that are behind the scenes to get out there and meet people as it is for those visionaries. So I like to say if you're a visionary looking for an integrator, maybe you go to less niche events. Maybe you go to a Grant Cardone event. Maybe you go to a Gary Vee event. Maybe you go to more general, bigger pockets business events, Tony Robbins, right? Because you're going to find more people who haven't found their niche as much, but are looking for a new chapter. And those are the people who are going to be phenomenal integrators, people who just want to support people, get stuff done, and build a wonderful, big business. And then on the visionary side, if you're an integrator listening, looking for a visionary, maybe go to the more niche events where people are looking for help. And that's the goal with good partnerships. Sometimes you'll find people that 1 + 1 = -3. And you definitely don't want to be in those partnerships, right? And that's okay. But sometimes you got to test to figure out what works correctly. And we just went through iterations and we knew exactly what we didn't want. And that allowed us to figure out that we did want to be working together. And that's allowed us to pair well together and build the business we've have today.
So walk us through that in terms of finding a partner then. Like, it sounded like you guys just had things kind of organically kind of meld together. But were those I guess you call them green flags, things that showed, hey, there's potential here? Why are we focused on Google over Facebook, or are you focused on both?
So as a company, we do both. What we've found is that we've had a hard time getting what I consider great results for our land investing clients on Facebook. For houses, Facebook is okay. Although I would say for both, Google tends to be a little bit more popular than Facebook. And there's a few reasons why. The main reason is the type of lead that you get from Google is way, way different from the type of lead that you get from Facebook. You could generally split marketing into two different categories. You could say there's interruption style marketing, which is really most marketing. This is like on Facebook, I was just scrolling through the feed. I was looking to see what my friends and family are up to. And then bam, there you are with your ad asking if I want to sell my land. I wasn't looking for that. Now that I see that, yeah, maybe I'll reach out to you, but I wasn't looking for that. Or like direct mail, for example, is going to be interruption marketing. I was going to my mailbox looking for my bills or whatever I was looking for. And then here's this mail that I didn't necessarily want, but now that it's here, I'm going to see it. And then the other side of that is more this inbound style of marketing, where on Google, I'm actively looking for a way to sell things
in exchange for some immediate cash now.
Yeah. Can you give us perhaps some, out of your experience, some strategies that you've seen in the way that people structure their seller finances, some of the nuances that somebody might be approaching and wondering, okay, cool, I get this concept. Are there any nuances in terms of a good strategy of setting up how, the way you're going to make a loan?
Yeah, I think the thing with owner financing is it is a playground of creativity. Like you can get really creative on which levers to pull when creating owner financing arrangements. And we don't even have, like when we create owner finance notes, we have some minimums. We say, okay, we can't go below this and we can't go below that. And we don't want to go longer than this time. But when we have these kind of high level frameworks, but inside of there, we're willing to shift all kinds of stuff around. If they want a really low interest rate, or maybe we'll trade that for a high down payment. Or if they want to pay it off over a longer period of time, maybe we'll make other exchanges. So we kind of figure out what they need, and then we figure out what we need, and we find the best possible scenarios between the two by kind of pulling different levers that kind of go along the loan spectrum of, all these different opportunities you have to kind of optimize for both parties.
JT, can you walk us through at a very high level, what are the major steps to setting up a loan like this? You know, what is the time length typically associated with something like this?
Yeah, from a paperwork perspective, it really depends on your process. If you are closing through title or attorneys, which most flippers are these days, then you can typically lean on them, the closing attorney or the title company, to produce appropriate standardized docs for your loan. Right? You just provide them the details and the terms of what needs to be created, and they will provide you all the necessary documentation, or in this case, provide the borrower the documentation for them to kind of use, sign, and close with. So a lot of times what we do, we build it into our contract, all the details they need to know. Once the contract's signed, we hand it over to them. They know, hey, this is an owner finance deal. Here are the terms of the owner finance, and they will create the documents. And obviously, these are relationships we've already built, and so we've reviewed their documentation. We're good with it, and then they use standardized processes just to like produce them based on the details we give them. And we do that with the different states we're in.
And, you know, a lot of these people were not tech savvy, didn't have cell phones, live in remote areas. One of them was a long haul trucker, who also, I think, somehow didn't have a cell phone. I think like landline only. So they're like unreachable when they're out on the road. And, it was very complicated to get that. It took us, in that case, I mean, that one took 16 or 17 months to get that closed. And then the other thing we did, which was kind of unique, is that it was very important to the sellers that, so the guy who was murdered, he's not buried on the property, but they have a memorial site on the property. And so he really wanted to keep that memorial site, but the county said, hey, you can't cut out whatever it was, like 1/5 of an acre, for this memorial site. It's going to make both, it's going to be an illegal subdivide, and then both properties are going to be deemed unbuildable because of this illegal subdivide that was done. So what we ended up doing was we just created an easement to their memorial site.
This is crazy. How do you feel about that?
You know,
like coming with no experience from land right into subdividing. What have you learned so far? You know, somebody who's fresh in subdividing, what did you not know, and what have you learned so far? So others who might be thinking about making that leap should keep this in mind.
Sure. I mean, I'm probably, you know, I think being naive is maybe helpful a little bit, because I wasn't scared to give it a shot. I mean, worst case scenario, I waste a bunch of time and like maybe $1,000, like based on like, I talked to consultants, and that's one thing is like, I reached out to consultants and like paid for their time on Upwork. Like I can't figure it all out by my own. I can get a long way with podcasts and Googling, but at the end of the day, I need to talk to an expert.
You're literally just calling up people and talking to experts.
Yeah, like looked up land use consultant and looked up podcast. Like I think it was Rick Roush is his name, like works with Callan Faulkner. So I looked him up, like, guys, don't be afraid to reach out to people. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to ghost you or tell you they don't have time. A lot of times people have time and you're going to make valuable relationships. And so I've certainly found that on the way through, you know, I'm taking a minor subdivide course right now with Callan and Rick. So I love learning.
You're into land. First of all, what caught your attention about land, and what is it like transitioning over?
What attracted me to land is, you know, I feel like with the mobile home parks and the rental real estate, it's almost like I had a nice foundation of, you know, cash flow. And it's a long-term asset that is going to grow over time. What drew me to land is the potential to generate, you know, it's much more transactional, but to grow like large sums of cash. It's very scalable in that sense. And there's so many acquisitions and disposition strategies that, like I told you, I boiled the ocean with the rental real estate. I'm also kind of boiling the ocean now on the land side. And it's something that I could scale up and get into relatively quickly versus I didn't have the capital to go buy a mobile home park by myself, but I can get a land business up and running pretty quickly.
But, you know, one of our first bigger deals in the first year was we wholesaled a 2,000 acre cattle ranch in outside of Abilene, Texas, which was a generational Texas cattle ranch with oil wells, full mineral rights and all of that. And we had, we came across this seller. It was a group of heirs who had inherited this, and they were at each other's throats. And they had a $3.5 million price tag on it. We were able to get it under contract for $2.1 million, and then wholesale it for $2.5, right? I had to work a lot harder. And now opportunities come to me, right? People come and ask me to help them with a deal. Buyers come and say, hey, I'm looking, I got 1031 exchange money. So the opportunities that come to me make my life much easier, It was basically instant credibility as an expert in the land space, right? And so that's something that people work a long time for. And even though I'd only been doing land a couple of years, I had been wholesaling real estate, commercial and houses for 10 or 12 years prior. So it wasn't that big of a jump for me because I was raised on the land and had experienced subdividing and buying and selling of land, throughout my youth. So it culminated for me pretty quickly. And then what resulted was a big network of people that have come around me and have helped lifted me up, and I've lifted some of them up and had students go out and make more money than they've ever made off of their first deals. And it's just been really nice,
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.